Hi there, I'm Nia Malika Henderson and welcome to On Background. For more than a year, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, evading British law enforcement agents he presumed would extradite him. But where would they actually send him and why? A new report in the Post today from three-time Pulitzer Prize winner Sari Horwitz suggests the answers are not nearly as clear and the legal threats facing Assange not quite as pressing as had been previously thought. Sari is here with us to discuss her latest story today. Sari, we're going to go right to Assange himself, sort of making an assessment. This was in 2012 when he talked to the UN. Take a listen at what he had to say.
We should not underestimate the scale of the investigation which has happened into WikiLeaks. I only wish I could say that Bradley Manning was the only victim of this situation, but the assault on WikiLeaks in relation to that matter and others has produced an investigation that Australian diplomats say is without precedence in its scale and nature, that the US government called a whole of government investigation.
And so, Sari, talk about what you have actually found out about this investigation. You had Assange very much saying this was huge and it's obviously ongoing. What's your sense of where it is right now?
Well, first of all, great to be on your show.
Thanks for being here.
For more than 3 years, there's been a grand jury investigation into WikiLeaks, the anti-secrecy organization, and Julian Assange in the Northern District of Virginia. EDVA is what the court's called. It's called the Rocket Docket because it moves so quickly. But this investigation has gone on for more than 3 years. And the persistent rumors among everybody who watched this and among Assange and his supporters was that there was a secret indictment, that there was a sealed indictment, sealed charges against him. And what I've been told from senior law enforcement officials is actually no, there is not a secret indictment. And what's interesting is I visited Julian Assange in London in 2011 for a story I was working on and talked to him. And he, at that point, he was under house arrest. He's fighting a legal battle to prevent him from being extradited to Sweden to face sexual assault charges. And while he was concerned about Sweden, he was much more concerned, and his supporters were much more concerned about him getting to Sweden and then being extradited to the United States because of what they called the sealed indictment and this prosecution that was going on.
And so WikiLeaks on Twitter, and they're very active on Twitter, their response to your story that is in today's paper, interesting to speculate about the latest move by anonymous DOJ officials versus WikiLeaks. Why now? Taking the pulse of responses or black PR? What do you make of their response to your story?
Well, they are understandably skeptical, and what the spokesman said to me was until a DOJ official comes out openly on the record and says there's no prosecution of WikiLeaks and of Julian Assange, we're not going to believe it.
Okay.
I didn't actually say this came from DOJ officials. I said senior law enforcement and US officials. They are skeptical, but this was not a PR move, I think, by the Justice Department or by the Obama administration, because it came out. I've been wondering about this for a long time.
Right, because you've been hearing people talk about it. And
yes, and I actually was one of the people that thought really there might be a sealed indictment. Certainly there have been in other high-profile cases like this. And so I asked, and I was persistent about asking, and that's how we got the answer. It's not that they volunteered it or put out a press release or an announcement.
And the thought being that there would be a sealed indictment in connection to WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, and Chelsea Manning.
Exactly. The Manning case, Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning, was an intelligence officer in Baghdad, in the army, and is the person who gave troves of, gave really the largest trove of classified documents ever in the United States in history, classified cables, diplomatic cables, field reports, and a shocking video taken from an Apache, a U.S. helicopter, of the Army shooting civilians, including a Reuters photographer. Gave all that to WikiLeaks, and then it was published by WikiLeaks, but also by the New York Times, Der Spiegel, and other publications. Manning was put on trial, military trial, so different legal system than the court system I'm talking about with Julian Assange. And he was convicted and now will be in prison convicted for 35 years in prison. And after that trial, there was a feeling Julian Assange is next.
Yes.
His lawyers said, okay, now they can build a conspiracy, and Julian Assange will be co-conspirator in this case. And Julian Assange actually, in an interview with the Telegraph newspaper last month, said that given that the DOJ said there was an ongoing investigation, he believed there was a sealed indictment.
And what's your sense if Julian Assange walked out of the Ecuadorian embassy or showed up here in Virginia? Do we have a sense of what would happen to him?
Well, I think everyone's belief is that if he walks out of that embassy, where he's been living since 2012,
right,
that he would most likely be arrested by the British police, because the British police are watching the embassy and have been since he went there. He got political asylum. And as I said, his political asylum, he says, is not because of the allegations he's facing for sexual assault in Sweden, because of his fear of coming to the United States. Now, if he were able to somehow get out of prison in Britain and come to the United States, what I've been told is he would not be arrested on U.S. charges.
Okay. But
again, he could be a fugitive from justice from Britain or from Sweden.
And the Sweden, it's a sexual assault charge, allegations
yeah,
that he actually believes will go away at some point, possibly because of the statute of limitations or because there's just no validity, and at this point they're only allegations.
Exactly. There's a search warrant, there's an arrest warrant from him out in Sweden. They are allegations, 2 different women involved. He believes they're not valid and that they will go away at some point, and he's much more worried about what could happen in the United States. And you know, he has cause for worry. There was a sealed indictment with charges under the Espionage Act of 1917 for Edward Snowden.
Right.
Who, of course, leaked classified information to The Guardian and to the Washington Post.
He's a U.S. citizen.
U.S. citizen, a former NSA contractor. He fled to Hong Kong, and then WikiLeaks assisted him in getting to Russia and with legal help and that sort of thing. So there's a connection there. And there was a sealed indictment in that case, and it did come, that was a very quick indictment.
Right, right. So what's your sense of WikiLeaks now? I mean, in a way, is Assange sort of out of the picture since he's under house arrest? Is WikiLeaks able to be WikiLeaks without Assange?
He's still very involved. Obviously, he's still very involved. They still do investigations. It's not quite what it was.
Right.
And it's interesting, to many, Julian Assange is a hero. To many people in the world, his organization...
He's been visited by famous people.
Famous celebrities.
And, yeah.
For pushing governments to get the truth out, to reveal secrets, for standing up to governments. He's really seen as a hero around the world. But to many officials in the United States, he's seen as a dangerous man who released documents that endangered people's lives in the military and elsewhere.
And you interviewed him. What is he like as a person?
He is a very charismatic person. He's extremely smart. I think I told you when I went to a pub with him as part of my discussing a story I was working on, he was treated as sort of a rock star when he walked in. The Washington Post worked with WikiLeaks on a story about the increasing amount of surveillance equipment being developed by U.S. companies and other companies around the world and sold to governments, including the United States.
Right.
And WikiLeaks, of course, was very interested in this equipment being sold to repressive governments like Syria.
And what's your sense of what he wants? What is his ultimate goal?
I think his ultimate goal is to continue doing his work, to be free of worrying about prosecution in the United States and in Sweden and in Britain, to get out of the Ecuadorian embassy and to do his work, and to continue getting documents that he feels are important to release, to reveal the truth about what is going on in various governments.
And he very much sees himself as a journalist.
He does see himself as a journalist and a publisher.
Right.
And he was the founder and the editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks.
And so we're going to go to this clip of Assange. He talked to George Stephanopoulos just about his fate. Here he is.
What's next for you, Mr. Assange? Any chance you're going to leave that embassy anytime soon?
I would leave this embassy. You know, it's a bit of a prison in some way, but I have good people here. But where would I go to? You know, I would end up in the outside world, where you are. But what is happening to the outside world? That's a much bigger consideration. It's a bigger consideration for me and my staff and the 12 different legal actions we have going in different countries. But it's a consideration for everyone. What type of place is Western democracy going to be?
First, I want to ask you, what's next in your estimation for WikiLeaks?
Well, I think it all depends really on what happens with Julian Assange.
Right.
I mean, WikiLeaks will keep going, but as the head of WikiLeaks, it's very important that he have access to material and that he's able to get this material out and get published.
And what do you think, what is his future? Here he is, he's holed up in this embassy. It doesn't sound like much of a life he's having there.
Well, it's really unclear what's going to happen right now in terms of he faces these charges in Sweden, and that's probably going to have to be dealt with first. I mean, it's very interesting. People asked about what this meant, that there was not a sealed indictment in the United States. What does that mean?
Right.
And I think that there's three possible scenarios. It could mean that the United States, in fact, for some reason, has decided they're not going to bring charges, and they're really not going to indict Julian Assange. It also could mean that they have made a distinction between people like Edward Snowden, who worked for a company and was really required under law to protect classified information, and they believe violated that oath.
Right.
And same with Bradley Manning. Versus Julian Assange, who is an Australian citizen and is publishing material that he was given. Or it could mean that the United States government is waiting to see how things will play out in Britain, whether eventually he will be kicked out or he will be somehow taken from the Ecuadorian embassy to Sweden,
right,
and face those charges and then be extradited to the United States. And then at that point, maybe there would be an indictment. So it's really unclear. While we are very sure that there is no unsealed indictment or any sealed charges, it's unclear what exactly that means for Julian Assange.
And you will certainly be on the case. 3 Pulitzers, I'm sure Assange is worried about you digging into everything, and he should be.
I don't think Julian Assange is worried about me.
Sari Horwitz, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for us today, and now we're going to move on to Twitter, and we're looking forward to a show later this week about the rise in atheist churches in America. Sounds something like an oxymoron in some ways. So our question of the day: what role does organized religion actually play in your life? Tweet us your thoughts with that hashtag postback. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.